You've been sitting outside Cranmore General Hospital for 40 minutes, and the cold has worked its way past your coat and into the old scar tissue along your left shoulder, the one that still aches, worse than anything else on your body when the temperature drops below 40 degrees. Your name is Everett Cromwell, and you are 84 years old. You've been sitting on this bench outside the emergency entrance since 6:15 this morning, and the automatic doors have opened and closed at least 30 times since then, letting warm air rush out and cold air rush back in. But nobody has called your name. You came here alone. You always come here alone now. There was a time decades ago when Sylvia used to drive you to every appointment, sitting beside you in waiting rooms with her hand resting on your knee. But Sylvia has been gone 6 years now, and you've learned to navigate hospitals the way you learned to navigate everything else in your life that mattered, with quiet endurance and very little complaint. If a story about being overlooked despite everything you've given is already tightening something in your chest, stay with this one, because what happens by the end of it is going to remind you why silence sometimes speaks louder than any argument ever could. And if these stories about dignity, patience, and the quiet strength of people who've been dismissed matter to you, consider subscribing. This channel exists to tell exactly these stories, and it's viewers like you who keep them going. Your appointment was scheduled for 7 a.m. sharp, a follow-up on your heart, the third one this year, because your cardiologist wants to keep a close eye on the valve they repaired 18 months ago. You arrived 20 minutes early, the way you've arrived early to nearly everything for 60 years. A habit built into you from 31 years of military service. From a career where 5 minutes late could mean the difference between a mission succeeding and men not coming home. You checked in at the front desk at 6:40, gave your name to a young receptionist who barely looked up from her screen, and you were told to have a seat in the waiting area. You did. You waited. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 7:30. Then 8. At 8:15, a nurse finally called your name. Not gently. Not with any particular warmth, just efficiently, the way someone reads off a grocery list. Her name tag read Priscilla Duvain. RN, you stood slower than you used to, your knees protesting, the same way they've protested every morning for the last decade, and you followed her toward the intake area. Mr. Cromwell, she said, glancing at her clipboard rather than at you. You're here for the cardiology follow-up? Yes, ma'am, you said. Okay, well, we're a little backed up this morning. I need you to step outside and wait until we call you again. We've got some urgent cases coming through, and the indoor waiting area needs to stay clear for triage. You blinked, not fully understanding at first. Outside? It's pretty cold out there this morning. I understand, sir, but it's just protocol. It shouldn't be too long. You've followed protocol your entire life. You've followed orders in places far colder than a hospital parking lot in February. Places where the wind cut through you in ways this weather never could. So you nodded, thanked her, because that's simply who you are. Thanking people even when they've given you very little to thank them for. And you walked back outside, past the automatic doors, into air that bit at your fingers and made your bad shoulder throb. That was 40 minutes ago. You sit now on the concrete bench just beyond the entrance, hands tucked into your coat pockets, watching your breath fog in front of you. And you think about how strange it is that the body remembers cold long after the mind has tried to forget, where it learned to endure it. You spent 2 winters in places colder than this. One in Korea in 1953, one that you don't talk about even now, 70 years later. Not even to the few people left who might understand. You wore that uniform for 31 years. 3 tours. A silver star you keep in a drawer because Sylvia always said displaying it felt like bragging, and you agreed with her. Mostly because agreeing with Sylvia was usually the wisest decision you ever made. You retired as a full-bird colonel in 1994, and after that, you spent another 20 years working with veterans outreach programs, helping younger soldiers transition back into civilian life, sitting with men and women who came home carrying weights nobody else could see. You never stopped serving, really. You just changed the uniform. None of that matters right now, sitting on this bench. Because right now you are simply an old man in a thin coat, waiting outside in the cold, because a nurse needed the space inside kept clear. A woman walks past you on her way into the building, glancing at you for half a second. The way people glance at things they've already decided aren't worth their attention. You don't blame her. You've become very good over the years at understanding how the world sees an old man sitting alone, invisible, Mostly, or worse, an inconvenience. Someone in the way. At 9, the automatic doors open again, and Nurse Duvain steps out, scanning the parking lot without really looking at the bench, without really looking at you, and steps back inside a moment later, apparently having confirmed whatever she needed to confirm. You want to call out to her, to ask if you can come back in now. But something in you, old pride maybe, or simple exhaustion, keeps you quiet. You've never been a man who demands attention. You've always believed that dignity means enduring without complaint, that the men you served beside who complained, the loudest were rarely the ones who carried the heaviest weight. But your shoulder aches badly now, and your hands have gone numb inside your coat pockets, and something in your chest, not your heart, not medically, but somewhere deeper, starts to feel very small and very tired. This is the part of the story where things are about to get harder before anything gets better, and it needs to. Because dignity that's never truly tested doesn't mean as much when it's finally restored. At 9:20, a young man walks past you, mid-20s, athletic build, wearing a hospital volunteer badge, and he actually stops, actually looks at you properly, the way almost no one else has this morning. Sir, are you doing okay out here? You've been sitting a while. His name tag reads Wendell Oakhurst. You appreciate immediately that he actually asked, that he actually noticed. I'm all right, you say, though your voice comes out rougher than you intend, roughened by cold and by the particular exhaustion of being unseen, waiting for my cardiology appointment. They asked me to wait outside. Wendell frowned slightly. Outside? In this weather? That doesn't sound right. Protocol, they said. You try to say it without bitterness, though some leaks through despite your best effort. How long have you been out here? You check your watch, an old steel-band military watch, scratched from decades of use. A little over 3 hours all told between waiting inside and out. Wendell's frown deepens into something closer to concern. Sir, let me go check on this. Can you wait just a minute? You nod, and he disappears back through the automatic doors, and you're alone again with the cold and the ache in your shoulder and the quiet, persistent thought that maybe you should have said something sooner. Maybe you should have advocated for yourself the way you spent 31 years teaching young soldiers to advocate for each other. 10 minutes pass, then 15. You start to wonder if Wendell forgot, or got pulled into something else. The way well-intentioned promises sometimes dissolve in busy places. Your fingers have gone from numb to genuinely painful, and for the first time all morning, something like real worry creeps into your chest. Not about the cold exactly, but about your heart, about the appointment you came here for in the first place, about whether anyone inside that building actually intends to see you today at all. And then, at 9:45, everything changes, though not in the way you expect. A black SUV pulls into the hospital's circular drive, not an ambulance, not a delivery vehicle, but a sleek, official-looking vehicle with government plates that make several people near the entrance pause and look twice. 2 men in dark suits step out first, positioning themselves near the doors, and then a third figure emerges from the back seat, a woman in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back neatly, wearing a dark blazer, with a small insignia pin on the lapel that you recognize instantly, because you spent 3 decades wearing similar insignia yourself. Her name is Brigadier General Odalis Marchbanks, and she is here unannounced. Because 18 months ago, when you had your heart valve repaired, you listed her, an old friend, a woman you served alongside in your final years of active duty, someone you helped mentor early in her career when she was a young lieutenant nobody expected much from, as your emergency contact, simply because you didn't want to burden anyone else, and simply because you trusted her completely. She had gotten a call this morning, not from the hospital, but from Wendell, the volunteer, who found your emergency contact information in the system, while trying to sort out why an 84-year-old cardiology patient had been left outside for hours, and who, on a hunch, decided that whoever this Cromwell, Ronnie, was in the emergency contact field deserved to know what was happening. Wendell had no idea who he was calling. He simply thought someone should know. General Marchbanks crosses the parking lot with the kind of purposeful stride that makes people instinctively step aside, though most of them don't know why, only that something about her presence commands the space around her. She sees you on the bench and her expression breaks. Genuine alarm crossing her face, and she quickens her pace. Colonel Cromwell, she says, and her voice carries clearly across the parking lot, formal and urgent all at once. Sir, What in God's name are you doing out here? You look up, and recognition floods through the cold fog of your exhaustion. Oh, Dallas, you say? And something in your chest loosens just slightly at the sight of a familiar face. What are you doing here? I got a call that you'd been sitting outside a hospital for 3 hours in February. Weather, she says, crouching in front of you, her hands checking your own hands, your face, the way someone checks for injury on a person they genuinely fear might be hurt. Sir, you're freezing. Your hands are like ice. I'm all right, you say. The same automatic response you've given all morning, though even you can hear how unconvincing it sounds this time. You are not all right, she says firmly. And then she stands, turning toward the hospital. Entrance with an expression you remember, well, from 30 years of service. Alongside her, the look she gets right before she moves an entire operation into motion. This is the turning point. And what happens over the next 20 minutes will ripple through every department in that hospital. General Marchbanks walks through the automatic doors with you following slowly behind her, and the shift in atmosphere is immediate and unmistakable. The two men in dark suits, her security detail, you realize now, a formality she's earned through decades of distinguished service and a current position advising on veterans. Healthcare policy at the federal level, flank the entrance, and every staff member near the front desk straightens instinctively, the way people do when they sense, even without understanding why, that someone significant has just entered the building. I need to speak with whoever is running triage this morning, General Marchbanks says to the receptionist, her voice calm but carrying an authority. That makes the young woman immediately reach for her phone. Within 2 minutes, a hospital administrator, a harried-looking man named Cornelius Ashgrove, appears, along with the charge nurse for the morning shift, and behind her, looking increasingly uncertain, Nurse Priscilla Duvain. Ma'am, I'm the administrator on duty. Is there a... Colonel Everett Cromwell, General Marchbanks interrupts, gesturing to you as you stand slightly behind her, still shivering slightly despite the warmth of the lobby, has been sitting outside your emergency entrance for over 3 hours this morning, in near-freezing temperatures, waiting for a cardiology appointment that was scheduled for 7 a.m. He is 84 years old. He has a repaired heart valve, and your staff sent him outside to wait in the cold because your waiting room needed space. Cornelius Ashgrove's face pales visibly. Ma'am, I wasn't aware of this situation. Let me look into... Colonel Cromwell served this country for 31 years. General Marchbanks continues, her voice steady but unmistakably sharp now. 3 combat tours, a Silver Star, 2 decades of additional service helping veterans transition back into civilian life after his retirement. And this morning, he sat outside in the cold because nobody thought to ask why an elderly man in obvious discomfort was still waiting 3 hours. After his scheduled appointment time, Nurse Duvain steps forward, her face flushed with a mixture of shame and defensiveness. I was following protocol, ma'am. We had urgent cases coming through and... Protocol, General Marchbanks says, not unkindly but firmly, does not mean sending an elderly cardiac patient outside into freezing temperatures without checking on him for 3 hours. Protocol means triage, not neglect. The lobby has gone quiet around you. Other patients, other staff members, all pausing to watch this unfold, and you feel, for the first time all morning, a strange mixture of embarrassment and something close to vindication, watching someone else say the things you were too proud, too used to enduring quietly, to say for yourself. I'd like to speak with him, you say quietly, and everyone turns toward you. You look at Nurse Duvain directly, and something in your voice, calm, steady, the voice you used for 3 decades commanding soldiers, cuts through the tension in the room. I understand you were busy. I understand triage matters, but nobody checked on me. Not once in 3 hours. That's what I want you to understand isn't right. Not that I had to wait, but that I was forgotten. Nurse Duvain's composure cracks slightly, her eyes filling. You're right, she says quietly. I should have checked. I got pulled into another case and I forgot. I'm so sorry, sir. That's not an excuse. I forgot, and that's on me. Her honesty, unexpected and unguarded, softens something in the room. Softens something in you too. You've spent your whole life believing that accountability matters more than punishment, that a genuine apology carries more weight than a forced one. Thank you for saying that, you tell her. That's all I needed to hear. But the hospital administrator, understanding the gravity of what nearly happened, insists on more than words. Within the hour, you're brought into a private examination room. Warmed blankets, hot coffee, immediate attention from the cardiology team, who run a full workup and confirm, with some relief, that despite the cold exposure, your heart remains stable. General Marchbanks stays the entire time, sitting beside you the way Sylvia used to, and something about her presence, familiar and steady, makes the whole morning feel less like a wound and more like something that's already beginning to heal. This is where the resolution begins to unfold slowly, the way real repair always does. Over the following weeks, something shifts inside Cranmore General. General Marchbanks, in her professional capacity working on veterans' healthcare policy, requests a formal review of the hospital's patient monitoring protocols, not to punish anyone specifically, but to close the gap that let a vulnerable patient sit forgotten for hours. The hospital implements a new policy. Any patient asked to wait outside for space reasons must be checked on no less than every 15 minutes, with mandatory indoor waiting for anyone over 75 or with cardiac conditions, regardless of space constraints. Wendell Oakhurst, the volunteer who made the call that started everything, receives a formal commendation from hospital administration, and you personally request that he be considered for the hospital's paid patient advocacy program, a suggestion they act on within the month. You tell him when you see him next that his willingness to notice, to actually stop and ask if you were all right, mattered more than he'll probably ever fully understand. Sometimes the whole shape of a story turns on someone simply choosing to look twice. Nurse Duvain, rather than facing disciplinary action alone, asks to be personally assigned to a new training initiative the hospital develops in the following months, a program focused specifically on elderly and veteran patient care, teaching staff to recognize the particular quiet endurance that often masks real distress in patients like you, patients who were trained their whole lives not to complain. She visits you once, weeks later, not as an obligation but because she wanted to, bringing a card the nursing staff signed, and she tells you that the morning she left you outside has stayed with her every single day since, has changed the way she sees every patient who now walks through her doors. You forgive her fully, because you understand something she's only beginning to learn, that people are rarely defined by their worst mistake, but by what they choose to do after it. General Marchbanks visits you every few weeks now, something that had fallen away in recent years amid both your busy lives, and your friendship, rekindled by crisis, deepens into something steadier than either of you expected. She tells you one afternoon over coffee at your kitchen table that she thinks about that morning often. How close it came to being a story with a very different ending. How many other elderly veterans might be sitting in waiting rooms and parking lots right now, equally forgotten, with no one showing up to advocate for them. You taught me decades ago that the job isn't finished until every soldier is accounted for, she tells you. Turns out that doesn't stop being true just because you took off the uniform. You think about that a lot in the weeks and months that follow. You think about how easy it would have been for that morning to end differently. For Wendell to have walked past without stopping. For no one to have thought to check your emergency contact. For you to have simply endured the way you've endured so much. Quietly, without complaint, disappearing a little more each year into a world that increasingly forgets what men and women like you gave to build it. But that isn't how the story went. Someone noticed. Someone made a call. And because of that single choice, an entire hospital changed the way it treats its most vulnerable patients. Not because you demanded it, but because you were finally seen clearly enough for someone else to demand it on your behalf. You still go to your cardiology appointments at Cranmore General. The staff greets you by name now, offers you coffee. Make sure you're never left waiting outside. Not because of who you turned out to be connected to, but because the hospital finally understood something it should have known all along. That dignity shouldn't depend on rank, or connections, or the fortunate timing of a phone call. It should simply be given freely to everyone who walks through those doors, especially the ones who spent their whole lives giving everything to protect people who would never know their names. You are 84 years old, and you spent 3 hours sitting in the cold outside a building because you were taught decades ago that enduring quietly is a kind of honor. But you've learned something new since that morning too, and that dignity isn't diminished by asking to be seen. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't to endure silently. It's to let someone else notice, and to trust that when they do, the whole world can still change because of it. Some men spend their whole lives serving quietly in the cold. The least the world can do is finally let them in.